People were displaced, and there was a lot of fear and tension, uncertainty, and it was really frightening.
From 1990 to 1997, it was a war, civil war. That's what it was like.
Thousands of people have died in the civil war that's ravaged the Papua New Guinean island since 1989. The Bougainvillians are fighting over the environmental damage caused by the huge copper mining operation.
When you saw the people, you could see in their eyes and also in how they regarded each other that it wasn't as the rest of the Southwest Pacific.
And so I spent a lot of my first couple of months really on the ground there, listening to people tell their stories about the conflict, wanting to just have a confessor in a way. And people had suffered pretty horribly, and I think I knew that. It was pretty affecting to hear those stories of the conflict and of what happened to people's families.
You're talking about a very large island or group of islands that had been successfully blockaded.
Women were starting to die in childbirth, services had broken down, the schools were not working. Security was a real issue.
It was horrible. And it deserved to be stopped. Taking the approach we did, one might argue, was high risk. But the circumstance of the people on Bougainville argued that high risk was a worthy and honourable risk. We did something different, it worked.
Don was the architect of the process, and along with people like, John Hayes, Bede Corrie, Roger Mortlock was also one of the master builders. He took a very hands-on approach and showed real drive and leadership, if you like, as minister. Don had been to Bougainville, I think it was 1994, and was appalled at the desperate state of things and developed a very strong personal commitment to restoring peace and getting Bougainville back on its feet. It wasn't until early 97, though, that he sensed that the opportunity was there.
When I became minister, this civil war had been going on for some time. To some extent, we, New Zealand, kind of left it to the Australians. Many people know that New Zealand tends to wrap itself around Polynesia and Australia tends to wrap itself around Melanesia.
Twice before, an attempt had been made to broker a peace deal, and in both cases it had turned to custard. But Don had, for one thing, the clout around Wellington to deliver on a successful process. He had great standing and prestige around the Pacific. We had the leadership that was needed.
I took a bunch of members of parliament and others on a Pacific tour, and we finished up in Papua New Guinea, in Moresby. 3 or 4 of us were helicoptered up to Buka and travelled from Buka down to Arawa. That was what was a real shock to me. You didn't see anybody when we arrived at Arawa, and then suddenly people started coming out of the bush, and they were not healthy-looking people. They had clearly been suffering. They had clearly not had the kind of food they were used to, and it was all a pretty miserable and somewhat of a heart-wrenching sight. I left there thinking, we've got to do something.
We set up a meeting with some of the rebel leaders. They had a price on their head, each of them, and they had bullet holes to show that they'd been through a rough time in Bougainville. And we had a meeting with those people, and then with Don McKinnon, agreed that they would try and get their troops to join forces and go along with the peace process. Then Don McKinnon telephoned Sir Julius Chan, as I say, in his last days in office, and persuaded him to give a green light, or at least a flashing yellow light, to the process and see if it would work.
The idea began that we might facilitate a meeting in Solomon Islands, where there were many Bougainvillians living in exile, and which of course is relatively easy for Bougainvillians to get to. That morphed into the idea that we would meet in Christchurch at Burnham camp for reasons of security. MFAT played a critical role in coordinating the process whereby we got the Bougainvillians off the island. The New Zealand Defence Force was absolutely crucial. Only they had the aircraft and only they had the ability to protect us and their own assets. The ministry with them devised a plan to pick up the Bougainville Transitional Government from Booker, and it was my role to go there and vouchsafe to the Bougainvillians that we'd come to collect them. And it was John's role, much more demanding and as it turned out dangerous role, to go to the main island and collect the BRA. That ended in near death, with John's helicopter being shot down.
We chartered 2 helicopters. We probably had about a dozen people that we were going to pick up, key players in various points on the island. Then we went into Panguna. We got shot at on the way in, and Gavin, the helicopter pilot, said, "Do we keep going on this or not?" He said, "They're shooting at us." And I said, "Yep, we keep going." We got into Panguna. Well, I've never seen such a big crowd in Papua New Guinea. There must have been 5 or 6 or maybe 10,000 people. Everybody had guns everywhere. So got it back into the plane and wound her up, took off. The Aussie co-pilot starts to panic. They're shooting at us, pull up, we're being hit. You could sort of feel the bullets going into the plane. And after a while you get the smell of sort of oil, and I'm thinking this is going to catch fire. What had happened was the bullets had come up they were aiming at me, and the bullets came up just under my bum, within about a foot. And because the plane was going forward, that's what saved me, because the bullets went just behind me.
The ministry's role throughout that was to say to the Bougainvillians, we're here, these are our messages, forget the fact that some of your people have tried to shoot John down, we're sticking with the plan.
I was a firm believer in something I once heard from L.B. Martin. He had a shop down here on Lambton Quay, and he used to talk about intimidating with integrity. I really liked that, and that's what I did down there.
I'd been Minister of Pacific Island Affairs for a few years, and there's one thing I learned being Minister of Pacific Island Affairs is you have to spend a lot of time listening. It would be always wrong to come to a rapid conclusion. And I thought, if we're going to do something which is more in tune with Pacific Islanders, this is going to take some time. Let us not believe that we can bring Bougainvillians to New Zealand and have it wrapped up in 3 days.
What we were trying to achieve at Burnham, in Sir Don's phrase, was to give the Bougainvillian factions, and then the government of Papua New Guinea, what he called time, space and encouragement.
I think the Bougainvillians and the Papua New Guineans realised that during the first lot of talks in Burnham in 1997, when they were brought together, and tikanga was used as a method to engage, but also as a way of showing that in terms of what we were going to do and how we were going to operate, it was much more familiar to people.
The role that women played was a mediatory role.
So if there are decisions going to be made on land or the safety and security of people, women are part and parcel of that. Bougainville is a matriarchal society, so therefore women had to be part of that process, the peace-building process.
The backdrop to the Burnham talks was really important to the Burnham talks succeeding. They really needed a positive political environment, especially in Port Moresby, to allow the process to unfold in the way that it did.
One of the most enjoyable processes was seeing that comfortable relationship between foreign affairs and defence.
The outstanding contribution really was the New Zealand Defence Force. They did a superb job, as they normally do, and one person in particular, which was Roger Mortlock, played an invaluable role. He was there right at the outset in developing the strategy and the approach, and he took it through to the stage of leading our first peacekeeping force.
That natural transition from the peace talks through to the truce monitoring group on the ground was just a continuation of the way New Zealand does business.
So I argue that I had two assault groups in the truce monitoring group. One was women and the other was priests.
They were a multicultural group themselves with a large number of Māori and Pacific Islanders within that group, unarmed.
And the truce monitoring group, of course, included women to set an example of what normalcy looked like, and, if you like, inspired a lot of hope on the part of Bougainville women.
The prisoner exchange happened at the same time as New Zealand was returning the Bougainville Revolutionary Army and the Bougainville Transitional Government back to the island.
Landing on a beach with nobody there, and then over a period of time seeing some 500 Bougainvillians arrive, the conduct of a handover of prisoners, and then the safe return of those prisoners on board HMNZS Canterbury.
We moored off southern Bougainville, a very large crowd amassed on the shore. John, showing a lot of courage with a small detachment of soldiers, went ashore in a rib. These soldiers came aboard the ship and were welcomed aboard the ship by our soldiers and sailors. In the way of these things in Melanesia, as they left their captors, they were given gifts, and those gifts included the most beautiful tropical parrots you've ever seen. So, in good nautical vein, there were also a few parrots aboard with the returning hostages as well. And they stayed with us as the frigate then sailed around the island to the various places and homes of the Bougainvillian delegates. It built support in the new Papua New Guinea government for what New Zealand was trying to achieve. Each step in the process needs a development which takes it forward to the next step. This was a crucial moment which helped build that key momentum of not just having a united Bougainville among the factions, but of having a Papua New Guinea government prepared to engage with them.
Neil Walter, I think, defined it better than I can. And he said about a number of occasions that the right people came together at the right time.
The preparedness to do things differently, the preparedness to take risks, was a huge part of the success here, as was the unusual blend of people who came together to make it happen.
It was really down to a small group of people seeing the opportunity, thinking, well, we can do some good in the world here, and knowing it was the right thing to do, championing it, getting the political buy-in to do it, and going ahead and doing it.
People that we don't even know exist. Ben Camder, the chief of rebel operations, who was determined that there was going to be peace. Sam Kaona, the general, acknowledging that he couldn't take the war to any further gain. Joe Kabui, who was number 2, not number 1, taking the lead. It was a small team effort that became a moderately sized team effort that became an island-wide team effort. Take anything out, nothing works.
Bougainville said to me, New Zealand's got agency. New Zealand's got mana. New Zealand's got the ability to do stuff. New Zealand can shape its neighbourhood for the better.
This warmth gives us access to people, including some of the more reclusive hardliners that perhaps other countries couldn't meet with. When you travel across Bougainville, it's very obvious how well regarded New Zealand and New Zealanders are.
We are able to trust them, we are able to open up to them. And also their volunteers, you look at their volunteers, they have come, they are working in the communities. So all those things, they've left behind.
The legacy of New Zealand's involvement in Bougainville is still really playing out. Bougainville will sometime in the next couple of years have to face a referendum on its eventual future, and the people of Bougainville and the government of Papua New Guinea are going to have to think that through.
It was a case of walking alongside the Bougainvillians. The legacy is in what you see on the ground. We got peace.
In a colourful ceremony, hundreds of islanders broke arrows and handed over spears, ending the Pacific's longest conflict since World War II.
To give ourselves and our children a better life, a better Papua New Guinea, a better Bougainville.